All right, guys, so exciting times. We're up to our last lecture, which is week 12, the session review. So today we're going to break down the final exam. I'm going to talk about some of the exam details, and then we'll go over quite a few practice questions and example questions just so that you can see how the questions will be worded and get an idea of what is coming in that final exam. So everything that's going to help you out, that is basically the purpose of today. And if we have a look at the content that we've covered this semester, we see in like weeks 2 to 5, we really went over those early developmental concepts. In weeks 6 and 7, we looked at more physiology. And then in weeks 8 to 11, we really honed in and looked at those specific periods throughout the lifespan. Now, weeks 1 and week 12 didn't really present any new content. So in the introduction week, we didn't have any new content. In week 12, we're doing the review, so no new content being presented there. So the 100 multiple choice questions are going to come from week 2 to week 11. Now, that's 10 weeks in total there. So week 2 to week 11 makes up 10 weeks. And what that means is that across your 100 multiple choice questions, they're going to be spread evenly throughout these 10 weeks. So you're going to have 10 questions coming from each one of these weeks. So it's going to be spread evenly throughout the content that we've presented. It's not focusing on one half or the other. There's going to be 10 questions that come from each week's content in that exam. All right, so let's now have a look at some of the example questions. Let's do some revision now. We'll do one question from each of these weeks, so from week 2 to week 11, just to see what type of question could be coming in the final. All right, so let's first have a look at week 2, where we did the fundamentals of health and lifespan development. So we talked about health and physical activity. We talked about lifespan development, some basic concepts. We talked about conception and genetics, and specifically the genetics of athletic performance as well. So this question says, height is 80% heritable. So which of the following statements would be true if someone was 160 centimeters tall? Now you can pause this video here and try and figure it out yourself, because I'm going to show the correct answers in just a second. But basically this question is saying one of these statements is true and the other ones are false. Now here you're given 5 options, so from A to E. Now in the exam, some questions might have 5 options, some might have 4, others might have 2, just being a true or false question. So the number of options varies per question. So there's probably never going to be more than 5. There's never going to be an F, but just be aware that there can be an E. So the first two say nature accounts for 128 centimeters of height, and the other one says nurture accounts for 128 centimeters of height. So in option A, they're saying that our genetics account for 80% of our height. Now, that seems like it could be true if we're told that height is 80% heritable. But if you think about that logically for just a second, what that would mean is that this 160 centimeter tall person genetically should be 128 centimeters, but they've grown 30 centimeters just from nurture, just from their environment, right? So that definitely can't make sense. And then B can't make sense either, because because our environmental context, our nurture, definitely can't produce 128 centimeters of our height. So it's got to be either C, D, or E. And the answer is C. So remember back in week 2, we saw this picture of LeBron, and we see that he's 2.6 meters, and the average height of a male is 1.75 meters. So 80% heritable doesn't mean that if you're 160 centimeters tall, that your genetics make up 130 centimeters and then the rest depends on your environment. It means that 80% of the variation in height among humans can be explained by genetics. So 80% of that variation from the mean can be explained by our genetics. If you look at week 3 here, we've got a question on cognitive development. Now, in week 3, we looked at 2 theorists. We saw John Piaget and also Lev Vygotsky. We spoke about the cognitive decline associated with aging and also exercise and cognition. So this question states, Lev Vygotsky's sociocultural theory of cognitive development involved which 2 principles? So you've got 4 options here, and I'm hoping most of you got this one right and said A. So more knowledgeable other and the zone of proximal development. So remember Lev Vygotsky's theory. He said that learners learn best when they're within this zone of proximal development. What they're trying to learn what they can with help from people who are smarter than them, which is the more knowledgeable others, and also things like technology and tools. So he said that by being in this zone of proximal development and working with a more knowledgeable other, you can boost your achievement in learning a task. All right, let's have a look at question 4 now. Now, in the actual exam, you won't be told that this question is coming from this week. We're just doing that now in the revision section. So, psychosocial development, we spoke about Sigmund Freud, we spoke about Erik Erikson. We also briefly touched on self-concept and morality, as well as exercise and psychosocial health as well. So the question is, what type of physical activity has the greatest positive effect on mood and well-being? Is it exercising with your favorite Spotify playlist? Is it resistance exercise? Exercising by yourself, or exercise focused on personal improvement? And the answer is D there. So we saw that in week 4. We spoke about exercise and mood and well-being, and we saw that physical activity has the greatest effect on mood and well-being when it's focused on personal improvement or goal focused, and it's in a group climate. So a group type workout would have been a correct answer there as well, but it wasn't an option to us. Okay, in week 5, we did physical development. So week 5, we looked at human growth, body composition, bone health, and then also metabolism. And this question says, which of the following is associated with the changes in body composition associated with aging? So declines in basal metabolic rate, is that associated with differences in body comp? Declines in activity-induced energy expenditure, declines in sedentary behavior, so does our body composition affect our sedentary behavior, and then declines in thermic effect of feeding. Now the answer is basal metabolic rate. So remember the basal metabolic rate, it's the energy that we expend during rest, and it comprises between 50 to 70% of our total energy expenditure. So it's how much energy we burn if we were just going to lie in our beds all day and do nothing. And there's a decline in the BMR of around 1 to 2% per decade from 20 years of age. Now, the reason that there is this decline in BMI is because of the changes in body composition. So we have an increase in fat mass and a decrease in fat-free mass, so a decrease in muscle as we're aging. And we know that muscle is more metabolically active than fat mass. So basically, we're just replacing our metabolically active tissue with less active tissue. So we're getting rid of our muscle and replacing that with fat, which is going to decrease our basal metabolic rate. Okay, so week 6 now, this is when we had a change from those early developmental concepts from week 2 to 5. Now we looked at some more physiology. So we started by looking at cardiorespiratory function across the lifespan. We spoke about the cardiorespiratory system and then how cardiorespiratory fitness and function changes in early life and also late life. So this question states in boys, there's approximately a 50% increase in VO2 max during puberty. Why does this large increase occur during puberty? Is it because of an increase in fat mass, an increase in body size, an increase in cell transportation, or an increase in muscle atrophy in the lower extremities? So straight away, I know it's not going to be D because atrophy means a decline or a disuse. So So our muscles are getting bigger, not getting smaller during adolescence. Increase in fat mass. I know it's not going to be that because the amount of fat that I'm carrying is not going to positively influence VO2 max. The answer is option number B there. So it's an increase in body size that results in this large increase in VO2 max for boys during puberty. We see the average ranges of VO2 max for boys and girls during that time range there. And we can see that for boys it increases, whereas for girls, VO2 max from 12 years of age to 18 years of age actually decreases. And boys exhibit this large increase in VO2 max due to massive increases in body size, in lung size, heart size, exercise capacity. And the decline in VO2 max with girls, it's most likely associated to increases in fat mass, and we also have less muscle. So more muscle means that my muscle can uptake more oxygen. So boys with a greater amount of muscle are going to be able to uptake more oxygen because they just have more space to do so. Okay, week 7 now, we looked at muscular function. So we spoke about the muscular system and also looked at muscular fitness in early and late life as well. So the question is, which of the following is not a reason why obese youth may enjoy resistance training compared to aerobic exercise? So 3 of these options are true and 1 of them is false, and we need to figure out which one of these options is false. Resistance training involves exercise interspersed with rest periods. True. Resistance training is consistent with the intermittent nature of habitual play. That is true. So kids don't run around in an oval continuously for 20 minutes. They run to the monkey bars, then run to the sand pit, then play there, then stop, then run across the park. Normally, kids' play pattern is very intermittent, just like resistance training is. Option number C is resistance training takes less time to complete than aerobic exercise. Ooh, that one is not true. So it may or may not. We're not told anything necessarily. So that one is the answer here. And we see in week 7, we spoke about obese youth that are generally encouraged to participate in aerobic activities, but they may prefer resistance exercise because they might think that aerobic based activities are boring or uncomfortable if they're carrying some excess weight. All right, in week 8, now we did sport and exercise in infancy and childhood, and we also did sedentary behavior in the tutorial. So tutorials are also going to be assessed in the exam. The question is, which of the following is not classified as sedentary behavior? Is it sitting on an exercise ball, working on a computer at a stand-up desk, driving in a car to work, or laying in bed playing on your phone before falling asleep? So the answer is option number B. So working on a computer at a stand-up desk. Now, if you're standing up, all of a sudden that is not sedentary behavior. So sedentary behavior does not include standing up. Some of you might have thought it could be option number D. Now, sleeping is also not a sedentary behavior. It's not classified as sedentary, but just laying in bed would. So sitting on an exercise ball, sitting in your car driving to work, and then lying on your bed before sleeping are all classed as sedentary. And we can see here that it does not include sleeping and it does not include standing either. Okay, let's have a look at the next question, which is in sport and exercise in adolescence. So in week 9, we spoke about the adolescence time period. We spoke about the physical activity trends for adolescents. We did pathway C and pathway D of the conceptual model, and we also spent some time looking at body image. So the question is, which of the following is true about pathway C of the conceptual model of health and physical activity throughout the lifespan? So pathway C is looking at how physical activity in adolescence affects health in adolescence. So we've got to figure out which of these statements is true. Physical activity is not beneficial to blood pressure in normotensive adolescents. Physical activity is not beneficial to blood pressure in hypertensive adolescents. So those first two are surrounding blood pressure, and then the next two, C and D, are surrounding bone health. So physical activity is less beneficial to bone health if started before puberty, and physical activity is more beneficial to bone health if started after puberty. So basically C and D, they sort of counteract each other. They both are saying the same thing, just in different ways. And if they're both saying the same thing, then we know it can't be either C or D as our answer. That means it's got to be either A or B. Now, physical activity in adolescence is not beneficial to blood pressure in people who already have a normal blood pressure. So the answer is A. We saw back in week 9 that there's little evidence that physical activity reduces the blood pressure in people who already have a normal blood pressure, but it can help for those who are hypertensive, so those with a high blood pressure. So it can help reduce theirs, but it doesn't really reduce it back down to the normal levels. Okay, in week 10 now, we did sport and exercise in adulthood. So here we really spoke about aging. We talked about the physical activity trends for adults and also for older adults. And then we spoke about pathway E and F, the final two pathways in that conceptual model of health. So this question, it says, what's the cause of the decline in immune function that's seen with aging? Now, this is a hard question. If you looked in your notes, you'd likely not find the answer to this. It's something that I've mentioned, I talked about in this lecture, but it wasn't necessarily written anywhere. So this is an example of one of those higher level questions that I'd expect the students aiming for a HD to get correct, but for, a lot of people to sort of struggle with this one. The options are decreased bone mass, strength, and density. So does the decline in bone mass affect immune function? Probably not. Decreased total number of T cells, decreased function of T cells, or decreased insulin sensitivity. So is insulin sensitivity related to immune function? I don't think so. So it's either going to be B or C. Now the answer is a decreased function of the T cells. So our T cells, they're part of our immune system, and they're going to help strengthen our immune response. With aging, we see a decline in the function of those T cells. So the total number stays the same throughout the lifespan, but the function of them does decline as we age, and that is one of the causes of the decline in immune function that is seen with aging. So a little bit of a tough question. It did come from this slide here, which is early in week 10 lecture. So talking about the physiological and biological changes associated with aging. And then this is the last sort of practice question that we'll discuss today. It's related to sport and exercise in diverse populations. So in the last lecture in week 11, we spoke about cultural diversity in Australia, Indigenous Australians. We discussed persons with disability and also gender and sexual identity. So this question is, what's the current gap in life expectancy between Indigenous males and non-Indigenous males? So if you guys have been doing those practice quizzes each week, so the lecture revision quizzes in each week, you would have probably seen this question before. The answer is D. It's 10.6 years. Now, it's important to note that those of you doing those practice questions, those quizzes, are going to have an advantage when it comes to the assessment task. You've seen the types of questions that I put in there. You've had a go at them. You've had more practice than anyone else who hasn't done them. So just like to point out now that back in, the early weeks of the semester, there were close to 200 of you doing those practice quizzes. And I just had a look at the week 11 practice quiz, and I can see only 40 people have done it. So you want to make sure you've done all of those. You've gotten 10 out of 10 on all of those during your revision, because we just see here another one's popped up. So those of you who have done that, those practice quizzes would have seen this question earlier. All right, guys, so we've come to the end of all of the content in this subject, health and lifespan development. So I'm hoping that you guys have all gotten something from this subject and are going to take some of the information and the content taught to you and implement it into your life and the life of your family and friends. Hopefully you guys were interested in the content and found some relevance in it. I know that there's some things that we just have to cover because of the syllabus, but I really hope that I have kept you guys interested and you're going to take something out of this subject. So the things that you learn in this subject, they're probably going to be applied throughout your life and your career. So hopefully I'll see all of you guys around the campus at UTS over the next couple of years of your degree. Otherwise, thank you guys for a great semester. You've all done so well. So I wish you all the best of luck in your final exam and throughout your degrees. Thanks, guys.